So as we see here, what we want to build is a quiz where we get addition and subtraction tasks here, and which we then have to answer. And if we're right, we want to flip this page and show that's correct and give us the possibility to go to the next question. And if we're wrong, then I simply want to show an alert here. So we need two components at least, the question and the answer. And we need the animation. We maybe want to switch between the components with our animation, our transition here, I should say. And I think these are all things we learned how to build, so let's start with it. So I'm starting a brand new project here. It's pretty empty. The only thing I got is my default Bootstrap container again, therefore in the index.html file, the import of Bootstrap. And that really is all. The instance here is totally empty, no data has been entered yet. Now, I want to start by building up my main interface on this root page here. So in the first row, I maybe want to have a title, which I give the class text center to, well, center the text. This is a Bootstrap helper class where I say the super quiz. Choose any name you want, of course. And then I want to have a different or another row below there, maybe add a horizontal line in between. And in this row, I then want to have the question and the answer. So here, I want to use my dynamic component. I can already insert the component here, but of course I need to create these components as well so that I can set them dynamically. Well, I will do that. So let me add a components subfolder here. And in this folder, I want to have my answer.view file and my question.view file for, well, the question, of course. Now, these two files here shall be switched dynamically. Now, to be able to switch them, I will already import these components. I know the files are empty, we're going to add this, but I can already add the imports here because I know I will fill these files. So I import the question from components question.view, and I do also import the answer from the answer.view file. This allows me to add my components here, register them locally with app question, which points to question, and app answer, which points to answer, like this. And then in my data, I want to set up a property which holds the currently loaded component, because we want to use the dynamic components here with this component placeholder, we could say. Therefore here, let's say I want to set the mode, which initially is question, so that we see a question at first, at the beginning. And then I can simply bind it here with :is to bind this dynamically to mode. And this will be now question or answer. Now that won't do it though, because mode is question or answer, though the component has a selector of app question or app answer. So I can simply change this here in my mode property to app question, let's say. And now I'm loading the app question component here at the beginning. Now, as I said, this is empty at the beginning because, well, I haven't added any code to question.view, but we'll do this next. Now in the question.view file, I'm going to copy in some prepared code. Now this might look like a lot, but I don't want to focus on writing this JavaScript logic for the game here. Feel free to dig into the code to learn more about it. But I want to focus on adding this animation. Therefore, I will walk you through what I'll do here. I do have this title, which I'll put some questions stored in some property. And then I do have some buttons here, which are basically just executing on answer, where we pass this strange argument to which I'll come back, and which then show the answer. So one of the 4 answers. Now, of course, I need to generate the answers, and I don't want to have the same button which holds the correct answer at the same position all the time. This is why I pass a second argument, or where I do have something else than just answer on my answers, which seem to be stored in an array. Correct. So this determines if this answer is correct or not, so that any button here may hold the correct or false answer. And we determine it upon clicking because it gets passed here to the array, to the method on answer. So let's have a look in the answer array therefore. That's the button data array to be precise. And there we do have a couple of objects which each have the answer set to initially to 0. That will change, of course. And then whether it's correct or true. This will also change. Now, these are my button data fields or the button data objects. And then in methods, I got the generate question method here. Now generate question is called here in the created lifecycle hook, so whenever this component is loaded. And in this method here, which is quite long, what I do is I generate a first and a second number because we want to add or subtract them. Then I generate which mode we want to use. That is a random number between 1 and 2. Generate random number, as a side note, is a helper method here, which I wrote to give me a random number between a minimum and maximum border, and then maybe also exclude some numbers from getting generated. That will become important when generating the answers. So here I do generate these three random numbers, the first and the second number for the addition or subtraction, and then the mode, subtract or add. And then the correct answer is set to 0 initially. I then switch between the mode, and mode addition is just 1, whereas mode subtraction is just 2. So just a global constant I use here. And if mode number, a random number between 1 and 2, is 1, that is what's stored in mode addition in the end, then we set the correct answer to first number plus second number, and we set the question to what's first number plus second number using a literal here, string literal. That's a ES6 feature, which allows me to output our property or a variable like this inside of a string. So it's a ES6 feature. And then I break, of course. And in subtraction, I do the same, but with a minus sign in between, because now we're subtracting. And the default is that we get an error, because, well, if we do get anything else than 1 or 2, something failed horribly, because this generate method should only give us 1 or 2. Well, that's the determining of the mode and of the correct answer. And then we need to generate some fake answers. So I make sure that for all the 4 buttons, I do set some values. The value on the first button is the correct answer minus 10, and then the correct answer plus 10. So these are the minimum or maximum borders for the generate number function. But I never want to set the correct answer itself. So I populate all 4 buttons with wrong answers, which is why I set the correct property to false for all 4 buttons here initially. I need to accept, or I need to exclude, I should say, this correct answer here from the random number generation, because otherwise I might have 2 buttons with the same answer, but one of them gives me that is wrong, which would not be the desired behavior. So all buttons are initially set to wrong answers, and then here on the correct button, I generate the correct button. So I generate a random number between 0 and 3 because I have 4 elements in the button data array which holds my buttons or the data for these buttons. And then I generate a random number to determine which button should now get the correct answer. 0 to 3 because the first button has an index of 0 and the last button has an index of 3 because we have 4 buttons again. And then I simply generate which button should hold the correct data, and then I set the correct data on that button, so on this button data to be precise. This is how I populate my buttons with wrong and right answers or data. And then finally, I do have this onAnswer method which gets executed. And in the onAnswer method, I get isCorrect passed, which is stored in the button data object. Keep that in mind. Correct is passed is stored here, and I do pass it when calling onAnswer. And I simply emit an event here, answered, where I also emit whether this is correct or not. Now this is all I do here. Is a lot of code. Most of the code is for the number generation, which is why I didn't want to show it in detail here. I hope it was still understandable. Otherwise, feel free to answer in the question and A section, of course. And with that, let's move on to the answer.view file and also populate that. Here, I'm also going to copy in some prepared code. And of course, you will find all the code attached to this lecture. And here, I basically say that's correct because I only show this if it's correct. Otherwise, I show this alert. And if we then click on next question, I emit an event called confirmed. So I emit this confirmed event here. And in the question.view, I emit the answered event. So now the job in our app.view file is to listen to both events, whether an answer was picked or was given, or if we, after giving a correct answer, clicked on next question. Hence here, I will add two event listeners, add answered. This is my answered custom event emitted from the question.view file. And here I want to execute answered and pass on the event data stored in this specific $event property, or variable I should say, created by Vue.js. And keep in mind, this comes from the question property here, the question component, excuse me. And here I pass if this is correct or not. And this is specifically what I want to store here in $event. Now, if the other component is loaded, then I need to, the answer component, I need to listen to confirmed, so that the answer was confirmed and we want to see the next question. And then I simply switch the mode to app question again. Right now we don't have a place to switch it to app answer, I'll come to this, but here we definitely switch it back. Now the place to switch it to app answer, of course, is in the methods object here. We'll write this together. Here I do have my answered method I want to execute up here. And I pass is correct here as an argument, which gets passed from this loaded component from the question.view file. And here I check if is correct, if this is true, well then I want to set this mode to app answer. So I want to load my answer component. But if this is not correct, so in the else case here, well, then I want to set this mode definitely to app question. It should be in that mode already, but just to make it sure, or to ensure it. And I want to show wrong, try again as a alert here. Really simple. Well, and this is all the initial setup it should need. If I save this, my server is already running, and I load this, we see it here, and now let's see, that should be this result. We see that's correct. And we can now switch between that. The missing piece, of course, is that we animate this. And this is what we'll do together in the next lectures.